Hi, everybody. Today, we are going to talk a little bit about photojournalism portfolios, which are the most important thing you can put together in order to get yourself hired either as a full-time photojournalist or as a freelance photographer picking up gigs, or just simply as someone who wants to be a writer or work in television journalism but wants to show off other things you can do to make yourself even more hireable. So again, this isn't really an optional thing. If you want to make it in photojournalism, you're going to have a portfolio of some kind. And what we mean in this context of portfolio is a website that you can show off your work. And we'll cover the best practices of that today. You all have it pretty easy in terms uh, of photojournalism portfolios, at least. Back in the day, making a photojournalism portfolio involved going and buying a portfolio book, and then you had to go get your photographs printed, and then you had to buy this special glue that glued the photographs to the pages of the portfolio book, but it glued them not quite strong enough that you wouldn't be able to replace them, so you could still kind of peel them off. And they were super annoying and terrible. But nowadays, a portfolio for a photojournalist is a very easy thing comparatively to put together. So they look something like this. This is the website for Hilda Perez, who, if you were wondering, this is the photojournalist that taught me how to be a photojournalist. Hilda Perez, her website is a really cool thing to take a look at. You can look at her portfolio of work, where she's got lots of examples of the photographs she has taken through the years. And all of this is in service of her picking up freelance gigs. She works primarily as a freelance photographer nowadays. And so being able to show off her work means that she's able to show other companies what she's capable of in order to get contracts to work for them and fulfill assignments for them. Sorry, it took me a while to come up with the word there. So let's go back to share. Let's move back over to this. Let's go minus that. Now let's go. There we go. Sorry about that. Still learning how to do multiple things at once on the Zoom. So there's a number of options for making your own portfolio websites. The two places that I suggest mostly are come on, PowerPoint. There we go. Are Squarespace and Wix. Squarespace is a paid service, and Wix has both, because you've used Wix in classes before, Wix has both a free and a paid version. And they have a lot of really good options out there. So if we, again, go to, there we go. If you go to Wix, I'll actually post this along with the video lecture that you're watching now to the Folio site. But if you go to the Wix blog and then scroll down, you'll find a bunch of linked examples of how to put together a photo-based website on their side of things. An example that I really like is the photographer Hillary O'Leary, who is a predominantly wildlife photographer, but also shoots how people interact with wildlife, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. And so I really like this picture of the rhino biting the dude's hand. Look at that. Oh, it's so cute. And then Squarespace, which again is a paid service. If you go to their website, they've got a whole listing of photographers who use their site to produce their own portfolios. Joshua Kissy is a photographer who I like their portrait work quite a bit, and they use Squarespace for the creation of their portfolio site. So just two good examples, but I'll post the links to the lists of examples if you want to try to be inspired by them to the folio. Okay, so the reason why I recommend these two and not sites like WordPress, which is a very popular website creation tool, and it is good in a lot of ways, or Blogger, is because both of them run into the same problem of ownership. So if I pull the licensing agreement from the terms of service from WordPress, it says that by submitting content to Automatic, which is the company that owns and manages WordPress, For inclusion on your website, you grant Automatic a worldwide, royalty-free, and non-exclusive license to reproduce, modify, adapt, and publish the content solely for the purposes of displaying, distributing, and promoting your website. Essentially, it gives them a temporary right to use your photographs for promotional purposes, and that means that you don't own the entire copyright of your work, which is kind of a bad road to go down if you're a photojournalist. So I would avoid using these sites, and as website creation tools pop up, as new places pop up for you to go and easily make a new website, just always check their terms of service to make sure that you are retaining the entire copyright for your work. And ultimately, your goal is to show off your photos in a user-friendly way. But one warning here, and this will go into something we'll talk about a little bit towards the end of the video. If you're going to put your own photographs up on these sites, which you should as a portfolio sites, don't put downloadable high-resolution versions of your pictures up. You'll notice most photojournalists aren't going to do that. Most photographers in general aren't going to do that. And that's because if you put high-resolution downloadable versions of your pictures up on a website, someone in a ski mask holding a laptop will come around and steal your stuff, which is not great. You want to avoid copyright and problems as much as you can, people stealing your copyright. And so we'll talk about ways to avoid that here in a second, but for now, that's sort of a good general rule. So in terms of going down things that make for best practices with photojournalistic portfolio websites, I turned to some advice that was posted by the NPPA, which is the National Press Photographers Association. You can think of them as being like SPJ or NABJ, except for photography. They are based on visual storytelling in terms of professional practices there. So some advice on building a portfolio website in photojournalism for a photojournalist. Step one, make sure that you are being original in the design and layout of things. Now, that's not to say that if your template that you choose to use from Squarespace or Wix looks a lot like somebody else's use of that template, that's not saying that that's the worst thing in the world. And it's okay to draw influence on the layout of things from other photographers, but just don't rip them off completely. Consider the things that you, within even a basic template, are going to have the ability to control, like the background colors, the framing colors, the font selection, the font size, all the stuff that you can change. Make that stuff distinctly you. Make that something that is very clearly identifiable as being your work and doesn't look like somebody else's portfolio website. Because remember, ultimately the goal of this website is if you want to apply for a job or if you want to get some freelancing gigs from another company and you send them a link to this portfolio website, the goal is that the hiring editors will remember it. And if it looks like everybody else's portfolio, it's not going to be remembered. It's going to be forgotten. So make yourself stand out in the design of these things. Notice that all three of the photojournalism examples I have shown you so far, both Hilda Perez as well as the two examples from Wix and Squarespace, all have very striking images when you first load the site up, which leads us nicely to our next point, which is in building a photojournalistic portfolio website, keep it visually focused. You shouldn't see a whole lot of text. When you first load up that website, you should see photos. You should see either one or multiple photos. It should be photography that is the main focus. Especially what we call above the scroll, which means that if you go to the website and before you scroll or click anything, just the first thing you see, most of the real estate of the screen for a photojournalistic portfolio site should be images or at least one prominent image. So if we go back to screen caps of the two photographers I highlighted so far, Hillary O'Leary's site, big picture of an elephant kicking up dust, right? Like there is very little text. What text there is only on the left-hand side, and it's sort of an artistic way, and then the tabs at the top. And Joshua Kissey's site, if we look at that, we see the only text is the photographer's name, as well as the tabs then at the top. And the tabs are actually built to be vectored over the image, the prominent image in the center of the site. If you are making a photojournalistic portfolio, the goal is to show off your photography skills, so pictures should be the first and main thing people see. You want to make sure that you edit. And what we mean by edit isn't hop into Photoshop and make your pictures look better. It means just pick and choose carefully the photos that you choose to put on the site. You don't need to put everything. Don't include any clunkers. Any photograph that you are not 100% really happy with, just don't include it. Only put the ones there that make you look the best. Your goal is not to show off every single photograph you've ever taken. It is to show off your absolute best pictures. This is a mistake that far too many beginning photojournalists make, which is treating their portfolio websites as sort of a depository to just dump all of their pictures. It's not meant to be a storage place for your pictures. It's meant to be an advertisement for your own skills. So pick and choose the best pictures that you have taken thus far. And that, of course, builds on our next point here, which is play to your strengths. What I mean by this is when you're thinking about picking your best photographs, also think about the ones that represent the kind of photography that you do best. And what I mean by that is, at this point in the class, having completed this many assignments, you have probably figured out there's certain styles of photograph that you like taking, even more so than other kinds of photographs. So maybe that you're particularly good at, or you really like taking dramatic close-up shots that are really, really up in someone's face, or you really like taking business profile shots, or you really like sort of sporty action shots where people have a lot of motion going on. You're going to have a preference for the kind of thing that you like doing. So highlight that, right? Take not only just your best work, but the best work that showcases what you can do better than anybody else. Put that as your forward-facing visual element to people out in the world. And that's not saying that you want to limit your portfolio to only one genre. Matter of fact, I would suggest to not do that. Like, even if you're really good at sports photography, don't only put sports shots in your portfolio. Diversify the kinds of stuff that you're taking pictures of or that you are putting in your portfolio. That's fine. But if what you really like are dramatic close-up shots, have some dramatic close-up shots from sports and from a concert and from a business profile. The kind of shot is different than the genre that you are going to be taking pictures of. Nowadays, it is in your best interest to make yourself look as diverse in terms of genre as possible. So the more that you can show the different kinds of thing you can take pictures of, the better. I think it's a really good idea to include at least one personal project or story. That means the kind of stuff you have been doing in this class, where I'm asking you to turn in 20, 10, and 5 photographs in a series. I want you to, or I think it's a good idea to include at least one of those in a portfolio website for a photojournalist, because one, it shows off that you know how to do this kind of thing, this feature photography. Remember when we were very early on in this class talking about the different kinds of photojournalism, we talked about how there was breaking news photography, which unfortunately I can't have you do in this class because you don't know when breaking news is going to happen. If you did, it wouldn't be breaking news anymore. What I have you doing is what the Pulitzer Committee calls feature photography, which is the kind of photojournalism where a single picture is part of a longer story that is using photographs to sort of sum up something. So show off your ability to do feature photography. Ultimately, also this is important because it proves to people who might hire you that you know how to tell a story. You can do more than just go take a picture of a restaurant if they're running a profile on a restaurant and as a one-off assignment, that you know how to go and do a full story if they were to ask you to do that as a gallery or as a complementary feature story, to have a visual element to a feature story. Being able to show you could do more things is always going to be helpful. In that same vein, I think that you should include at least some portrait work. And if you remember back to that conversation on the kinds of photojournalism, portrait work, what we mean is the person as the main subject looking into the camera, the kind of stuff we see on the cover of magazines or in Humans in New York, that website that I sort of ripped off our assignment. So again, it proves you can do more than one kind of thing. It makes you hireable. Also, environmental portrait work, the kind of thing I have you all doing for that Humans of Statesboro / Humans of COVID-19 assignment, depending on how far you were along in it. That kind of photography is in high demand now for A lot of news sites, as well as public relations, internal public relations, are looking for people who know how to do good environmental portrait work. So kind of the reason I have you doing that assignment in the first place in this class is so that you have some of it in your portfolio to use when you go to apply for jobs. I wanted to make sure you had that skill set and have something you can prove that you know how to do it. So I would make a portion of your portfolio websites be just environmental portraits and examples of that. You can take them from that assignment I had you do. If you have a situation where, for example, for local media or for campus media, if you've taken photographs that correspond with stories, which we call clips in the world of journalism, if you have those, make those connect. So if you have photos that correspond with the written story, make sure they connect in some way. If you wrote the story, then you can always copy and paste the text of that story onto the portfolio site. But I actually think a better way of doing it is, if the story's been published in any way, hyperlink the story where it exists on that outside news website, hyperlink that on your portfolio website. So if someone is looking at your site, they'll see this picture, and then they'll see a link off to the side, or maybe hovering on text over the picture that is, this is the story it went with. They click on that, and it goes to that outside news site where the story has and pictures have been published. So that helps, one, because it connects context together, but it's also very helpful to prove that your work has been published and can go along with written work. Have your resume and your contact information easily available on the portfolio site. Keep your resume and stuff up to date as well. Your contact information, make sure that it's the most recent phone number that you've got, etc. So to bring Hilda Perez's site back up for a second, the person who mentored me in photojournalism, if you notice, the tabs that she's got on her site has got an about and contact. I think it's a good idea to have an about me, which is talking a little bit about yourself, but then also contact, which should have your email address, your phone number, if you feel comfortable putting that. Some way people can rapidly get in touch with you because they might want to hire you. You want to make sure that you are protecting your intellectual property as you put stuff up on the internet. When people put stuff up on the internet, other people will come along and steal that stuff off of the internet. Whom among us has never illegally downloaded anything ever? You know, it happens. But if you are the photographer, if you're the content creator on the other side of stuff, and especially if you're starting up a new career, you definitely want to make sure you're protecting your property. So I think it's a good idea to, once every few months, 4 or 5 months will do the trick, use a reverse image search site. 10i, Tineye, is a really good one. 10i, what you do is you upload a picture to 10i, and it'll reverse search the internet to see if anybody else has got that picture hosted up on their own website. And then if they do, then you have to take action. So if some place like a news agency is using your work without your permission, you have one of two options. One is to send them an invoice. That usually scares them enough to delete the picture off of their site. The invoice, again, if you remember to last week's video, is the bill, essentially. So if someone takes your photographs without your permission and runs them on their site, and you send them a bill that says, hey, I see that you're using my work without my permission, here's how much that's going to cost you now. Very rarely will they actually pay, because most of them, if they were going to pay, would have just done it to start with. But they will then take that work down and get rid of it, so they're not stealing your work, which isn't really helpful to you in the long run that much, but at least it keeps people from stealing your stuff. And the second thing you can do is issue what's called a DMCA takedown notice. The DMCA is the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. It's actually a pretty old law now at this point. I believe it was passed in '96. But it essentially says that the hosts of websites are not in charge of managing copyright. Instead, it is the users themselves that are liable for copyright. But the owners of the site have to act as sort of guardians or shepherds. So essentially what you do is you find who owns the site, and you send them a template version of a DMCA takedown, which looks like this. You put your own information in on the spots where you need to put your own information on the template, and you send it. And it essentially says that legally they need to take your work down, as it has been taken without permission. And speaking of protecting your own work, It's not a bad idea to develop and start putting your own watermark on images, especially if they are larger resolution images you're going to be using on the portfolio site. Even though I suggest not using gigantic resolution shots because people will take them, if you're going to post some as proof of concept, then watermarking is a good idea. Watermarking is the act of putting sort of gray text or grayed out text over some level of the photograph to try to prevent it from being stolen. Sometimes people will just blanket the entire picture with it like this. Sometimes they'll put it in the corner. Either way, it's not the worst idea. It's not a bad idea to just go ahead and develop one and have it around just in case. When I dabbled in this kind of stuff, I had one that was really just like dirt simple. It was just my initials put together real quickly. It looked like this. And then put some thought on how you want to place and protect your watermark. So where you're going to put it on the pictures, if you want it to be super obtrusive or not super obtrusive. There's a lot of debate on best practices there, and I'm not going to get into it because I don't think it actually has a correct way to do it versus an incorrect way of doing it. But what I am going to do is post an instruction site or instruction manual on the Folio site that is how to use PowerPoint very simply to put watermark language or watermark text over an image to protect your work. And then last but certainly not least, keep it updated. As you take new shots, as you go out and do assignments, as you get more photojournalism work in, update your pictures every now and again. You don't want to have the same pictures on your site for more than a year at this point in your career. You want it to be constantly fresh and updating so that if you have a new opportunity and you send this portfolio site off to somebody, they're not going to say, well, I looked at this 2 years ago and these are the exact same shots. So you don't have anything new to show me. You don't want to let your work get stale is sort of what I am getting at here. So that was just a very quick look at the portfolio process, portfolio making process. And this will likely come along with an extra credit assignment I'm going to come up with for you all to make your own portfolio site if you want to. Instructions for that will come out next week on Monday. So with that, I will see y'all later.